Ladies and gentlemen, the class of 1997. Wear sunscreen. If I could offer you one tip for the future, sunscreen would be it. The long-term benefits of sunscreen have been proven by scientists, whereas the rest of my advice has no basis more reliable than my own meandering experience, which I will dispense now. Enjoy the power and beauty of your youth, or never mind. You will not understand the power and beauty of your youth until they have faded. But trust me, in 20 years, you'll look back at photos of yourself and recall in a way you can't grasp now how much
brothers and sisters. We're going to roll Verbs 3 to 13 to 18. Happy are those who find wisdom and those who get understanding, for their income is better than silver, and their revenue is better than gold. She is more precious than jewels, and everything you desire can compare with her. Long life is in her right hand, and in her left hand are riches of honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantries, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life. Those who lay hold of her, those who hold her fast, are called happy. We be thankful and happy for what we have, and love and caring and connection is the most valuable part of the golden rule. Do unto others you like to be done unto. Enjoy one another here and your neighbors on earth. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I'm about to do something that I've been warned against doing. I'm going to talk about the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, I don't want you to get too agitated. A little bit of background. Somebody, more than one person, has told me over the years, Giuseppe, you can't preach about the book of Ecclesiastes. It's too much of a downer. And that's fair. It is a downer. Our writer is processing an existential crisis. But it's also my favorite book of the Hebrew Bible. And what a shame it's been that I have not had the chance to talk about it from the front all these years. Also, our writer is deconstructing. And I think their journey of deconstruction holds some nuggets of wisdom for us. I don't want to oversell it too much, though. You see, our writer has kind of a dim view of seeking wisdom, which is ironic because it's included in the wisdom section of the Hebrew Bible. Now, I want to start us off by sinking into our writer's first words in Ecclesiastes. And I know you may be thinking, but we just heard words from Proverbs. Why are we talking about Ecclesiastes? For those of you who are already noodling on that, I don't want you to worry, we're going to get to it. But let's sink into our writer's words from Ecclesiastes. Pointless, pointless. Everything is pointless, a chasing after the winds. Now, we don't know who wrote the book of Ecclesiastes. He makes allusions to being a wise king who is the son or descendant of David. If you've spent enough time reading the Hebrew Bible, or maybe you've heard enough sermons about the Hebrew Bible, you may be able to put 2 and 2 together and get 4. So he's making allusions to Solomon, who, the story goes, supposed to be the wisest person who ever lived. And in Mediterranean tradition, especially in the Middle East, if you want to find wise people, you should go find a palace. It's the king. The king is supposed to be the wisest person. Why would you think that? Well, they are in charge of your destiny, your life to some extent, so you sure hope they know what they're doing, right? And here he is, posing as the wisest person who ever lives, saying it's all pointless. The writer is called Qoheleth. We don't know what Qoheleth means in this context. It means assembler, but we don't know what exactly he's assembling. Are we talking about an assembler who just called a group together and he just wanted to bum them out for 12 chapters while he just shares all of this? Maybe he's an assembler of wisdom, but this wisdom's all his own, so that doesn't make the most sense either. So we're just going to call him Qoheleth, and because Qoheleth is a mouthful, I'm just going to call him Q. All right? Don't get him confused with other Qs. I'm just going to call him that. Just keep it simple. And understand what Q is getting at here. We have to know the writings that come before Ecclesiastes. And that takes us back to the book of Deuteronomy. I know some of you are like, this feels like a seminary class, and I chose not to go to seminary class. I get it. Stay with me here. Deuteronomy is one of the most important books in the Hebrew Bible. It came before all of the books of the Torah, also called the Law, or the books of Moses, the first 5 books of the Old Testament Hebrew Bible. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Now, most of us in Christian traditions, if we ever get to the book of Deuteronomy, find ourselves so thoroughly bored. Okay, I'll just make my own confessions. I've read the Bible several times, and usually by the time I'm at Deuteronomy, I'm a bit bored. And so we just yada yada the whole thing. And it's easy to lose sight of its impact and how important it is, because it's not placed as the first book, it's the fifth. It's the 5th book. And by the time you've gone through the other ones, it's repeating a lot of themes. But when we understand it historically, we can see that it influences everything that comes after it. Deuteronomy has a specific way of looking at the world, and a specific way of looking at God. Deuteronomy and the Torah, they don't really have a perspective of the afterlife. If they do, they never talk about it. And so, all reward and punishment from God happens in this life. In their perspective, if you want to live a good life, you obey God, you get good things. You disobey God, you get bad things. We call these blessings and curses, which are some of the least fun parts of the Torah. And so there's a lot of prescription. Do this, and you will inherit the lands that God has before you. Do this, and you will be healthy. Do this, you will live a long life. Some of you may remember the 10 Commandments. Do you remember the reward, the blessing that comes with honoring your father and your mother? You get to live a long life. That's nice. But if you don't do this, you will be cursed. And who's doing the cursing? Well, it must be from the hand of God. And these are embedded as laws of the universe. Morality is working in tandem with God, the creator of the universe. So this is as simple as gravity. If you follow God's ways, what the writer in Deuteronomy is telling you to do, you will be blessed, and if you disobey God, you will be cursed. The most famous blessing and curse needs to be brought up at this point because it affects everything else we're looking at, and it sums it up all real nice and tidy. Those who obey God's commands will be blessed to the 1,000th generation and those that disobey God's commands are cursed to the third and fourth generation. Now, our writer is saying something about the graciousness of God in their perspective. Look how gracious God is. God blesses to the 1000th generation. God only curses to the third and fourth generation. Isn't that awesome? In this perspective, what you get is fair, and what you don't get is also fair. Proverbs, then. Proverbs has as its task the responsibility of showing people how to cooperate with this moral law of the universe. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, the book of Proverbs says. So our writers, and it's probably multiple, are saying, if that's the way the world works, if that's the way the universe works, as Deuteronomy is saying, well, we want to get into the nitty-gritty here and help you follow God's commandments, God's expectations, and avoid disobeying God. Wisdom, then, is obeying God the best, and foolishness is disobeying God. And just because we get a little bogged down by these terms, wisdom and foolishness, I want to make it real simple. The wise person is the smart cookie, and the foolish person is the stupid dum-dum. I don't think we have enough gravity attached to these titles. Fool is such a severe accusation in the first century, in the New Testament, that Jesus says you murder people with your words when you call them a fool. Now, I'm a big superhero fan, and I've read comics my whole life, and I've watched cartoons, and, fool's just thrown around so cavalier. You hear somebody say fool these days, you think they're like a funny James Bond villain or something, right? But what their meaning is, you're being stupid. I had a youth pastor who used to say, play stupid games, get stupid prizes. He's speaking from a Proverbs perspective. So in the book of Proverbs, you get certain prescriptions. Do X, and you get rewards associated with that. Get Y. So this passage that Rita just read, wisdom is this thing that ought to be sought out with everything you've got. It is more precious than the most precious thing. But don't let that confuse you and make you think like there's no earthly precious things associated with it. It's still a method in getting that which is desired. Whenever this female word, her, is being referred to, that's wisdom, by the way, Sophia. Long life is in her right hands. If you are wise, if you follow God, what do you get with that? Long life. In her left hand are riches and honor. What do you get if you are wise? Riches, honor, a good reputation. Her ways are ways of pleasantness. All her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who lay hold of her, and those who hold her fast are called happy. Happy. I've titled this message Glib Wisdom. So that tells you I do kind of have a dimmer view than many on the book of Proverbs, but I want to state something. It's a good book. It's worth your time and attention. It really is. It says some really profound things that have helped my life a great deal. Things like, you hang around with angry people all the time, you're going to get hurt. Some of us need to hear that, right? Because we keep getting hurt by these angry people we've been surrounded by, and we've never thought that maybe there's a relationship there. And that's not something that's desirable, right? It's just that Proverbs has such a simplistic, unnuanced way of looking at the universe, because it's writing what Deuteronomy's talking about. It's taking it to the extreme. So this is a book that I would say, read, enjoy, gain what you can from it, but read it with a grain of salt. Don't read it with an uncritical mind, expecting that everything that is prescribed in there will happen. Raise a child up in the way they should go, and they will not stray from it. In the writer's mind, if you've raised a kid up and they've done, all sorts of, I'm going to say debauchery because I don't have another word in my mind, it's your fault. It's your fault. But I look at that and I think, with a grain of salt, I do appreciate the bigger point there. We do have a role in raising up our kids. We are an influence on our kids. I do want to raise Brio and Emmy up on the way they should go. It's just, they may stray from it, right? So, Q looks at Deuteronomy and he looks at Ecclesiastes. He looks at Deuteronomy, he looks at Proverbs, and when he's writing Ecclesiastes, he says, pointless, it's all pointless. It's all a chasing after the winds. Hevel is the word for pointless here. Hevel is also the word for breath or air. His choice of this word indicates that he means it's all fleeting. It's fleeting. It goes away. What's the point? What's the point of anything if it could just slip through your hands? And our writer looks at the claims of Deuteronomy. He looks at the claims of Proverbs, and he says, it's not this simple. It can't be this simple. I've been the wisest person who've ever lived. I'm a king. What I've found is it's all slipped through my fingers. What do you do when your worldview fails you? What do you do when the moral laws of the universe, at least as you understood them, fail you? How do you make sense of things? What's the point is the most understandable question in the world, but it's a dangerous one. And it's such a dangerous one that this book almost didn't make it into the Hebrew canon, which means it almost didn't make it into the Christian canon. In fact, it's got some editor's fingerprints on it. We'll talk about that in the very last week. And yet, what's the point is the question that I think most of us, if not all of us, at some point in our lives, have wrestled with. When I was deconstructing, I felt so alone and isolated. It's part of the reason why in our Connect groups, I was so excited that our groups decided they wanted to talk about questions that we were raised not to talk about in church. Because I don't want folks wrestling with these things on their own. It is so lonely and isolating, and it doesn't have to be that way. But our writer is writing from that perspective. What do you do when things just don't make sense? So even though I've been warned, don't talk about this book, I can't help but talk about this book. If you've gone on any kind of deconstruction, if you've ever had to take apart and rebuild how you see the world in some way, I hope you can find companionship in this book. Wherever you are, whoever you are on life's journey, you're welcome here, we say. Well, this is one of those books that I think has long preceded us and welcoming people in. Sometimes what's the point is the most holy question we can ask. I invite you in the weeks ahead to read or listen to Ecclesiastes. And because it's a bit of a lot, you may have gathered from our writer's opening words that he can be a bit of a lot. On Sundays, I'm going to talk about it a bit. I'm going to try to make it easier to digest. But it's a beautiful book. It's a little bit of a downer. But there's things in there that are salvific, I think, that can help us have better company and be better company on life's journey. And to make it a little easier to digest, because our writer writes in a very stream of consciousness kind of way, you could just picture him blah, blah, blahing with beautiful, eloquent language, and there's a scribe trying to capture it all. He never says, like, can we actually go back to this point? Because I don't get the connection here. No, he just keeps going. So I'm going to break it up like this. Next week, I'm going to talk about the absurdity that our writer is wrestling with. The problems. You may be tempted to leave on that Sunday. Please don't. Please don't. The following week, I get to interview a couple of people from the organization SAGE. And they're going to invite us to consider working in a couple of our nearby schools as mentors. So we're not going to talk about Ecclesiastes that week. The week after that, we're going to talk about the meaningful. Those little pieces of light that our writer sees and calls out as meaningful, significant. And then the very last week, we're going to tie it all up. And we'll talk about some of those pesky editors too. All right? Give it a shot. Check it out. This might become your most favorite book of the Hebrew Bible, like it is mine. Or you might be like those canonizers who said, you know what? I want to just cut it out. Can we just do that? And I won't fault you. All right, church. Thank you for your time and your patience and joining me on this journey. I hope that it will be company on your life's journey as we do the work of making meaning where we can.